Hey everybody, Richard Tromans here. A special interview with Omar from Eudia. They have just bought OutHouse. Very, very interesting deal. And perhaps even more interesting is the bigger strategic picture of what Eudia is doing. First of all, let's talk about the acquisition. And thank you for being on the show. Just tell us a bit about why you did the deal and what's the 2 + 2 = 5 aspect of it.
Yeah. So I've come to believe that most people think that AI is the future of software. We believe that AI is the future of labor. And when you look at how most corporate legal departments function today, 95 or up to 98% of their budget goes to humans, services, people internal and external. And so our view from day one was that no amount of putting AI on top of the 2% is going to really fundamentally change things. You actually do need to have an answer to what do the labor systems of the future look like in a world where most of this work can now be automated. And I think, personally, I'm actually very optimistic that I think there's going to be more jobs than ever in this new world. There may be some temporary changes and transitions that we have to go through. But what's really guided not only this acquisition, but a lot of our strategy more broadly is when we find the rare, I'll just call it like less than 1% of service providers or lawyers who are out there that are actually already living in the future and embracing AI, completely transforming how they do the work, then it becomes extremely attractive to partner as deeply as possible with those people. And so Lyndon, the founder and CEO of OutHouse, is an example of one of those people where we met him actually because he reached out and was kind of obsessed with adopting AI to transform his practice. And so he had been an AmLaw 100 lawyer. He then became a general counsel of a prominent company. His own story is quite interesting. The reason he left that company was he found because he was adopting technology, he was able to get through things like contract review 5 times faster than anybody else. And so he set up his own business and suddenly that took off where he was speaking to other general counsels and because of his adoption of technology, gaining a major advantage. And so it just felt like a very, very, very good alignment between sort of how the two of us see the world. And at the end of the day, I don't think we can change this industry without having the world's best lawyers as part of the equation. So that's about the rationale.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, so technically it's a law firm in Maryland, but it's kind of an ALSP as well, effectively. What actually is it in real terms?
Yeah, so they had been a law firm, but they transitioned. So the legal entity is a ALSP, and so we did
So
not
you can
acquire.
buy it. So it's no big deal for you to buy that. 'Cause I was just thinking, because I know in DC there are special rules where you can actually do something like this, but I thought, Maryland, that's slightly different. So gotcha. Okay, well that's great, and I guess that builds on what you did with Johnson Hannah, which is definitely very much quite large ALSP, and then of course you built your own law firm, which is technically a real law firm out in Arizona because of the bar rules there, which will help you to do some of the reserved activities, as we call them in England, or regulated activities. Let's not go into every single item there, but let's talk broadly, as got you for a few minutes on the show. I mean, what is the strategy here? Where are you trying to get to?
Yeah. So the overarching strategy is that right now we have $6 trillion of human labor, which is broadly speaking the professional services industry, which is still fundamentally operating under what we believe is now an outdated view that judgment can be packaged into time and essentially either billed by the hour or provided under some time and materials type of business model, right? And that doesn't serve our customer very well because now that knowledge and judgment has gone from something that was a scarce resource to arguably, if not infinitely available, certainly much more accessible than before with AI. We think we have a great business opportunity and really opportunity to add a lot of value to our customers who've always been 100% in-house teams by really just offering a much better alternative to that, which doesn't offer that flawed business model. So I think I've talked a lot about the billable hour in the past. I think people get over-indexed.
But the two of us could bore the legs off a chair. Honestly, don't worry about it.
Yeah, but like just one other thing that I'll point out is like I don't think it's just sort of the extremely high ROI that you get as a customer by going with a incentive model that's aligned, where now the provider is fully incentivized to use AI to get all the benefits. I think the other part that's even more exciting to me is we're really building a brain for each company that we work with. And the company owns the brain. We don't own the brain, but our platform is used to develop it. And really, that brain is a company brain, which in some sense takes all this knowledge. Because I think when you outsource your work to a law firm historically, you're not just outsourcing your dollars, you're also outsourcing your knowledge. And the more you use that law firm, the more reliant you become on them. And same thing with service providers
And
or
you could argue
consultants.
kind of dependent, but not necessarily in a nice way.
Yeah, I think there's amazing lawyers at law firms, and we're
Yeah,
working with
sure.
many of them, and all of that. So I don't think it's anybody's being malicious, but I think the entire model sort of does, like when you think about it, the human expert externally is training their brain on your company's data and then renting that back to you at rates that go up 18% year over year, right? So it's not a great situation in the status quo, where at least the one who's really not winning from this setup right now, I would argue, is the in-house teams. And so we believe by shifting the model and actually encouraging and promoting the expert to share their knowledge as part of this company brain, everybody can win, but it's going to require a very, very different kind of ecosystem and business model.
Well, and that brings me to the next question, which is, unlike many legal tech companies, there are a few, but you actually have a real body of sort of paralegals and actual expert lawyers all together who are going to be doing, that human judgment aspect in sort of unity with the tech. Is that I guess because of necessity? At least that's what I've seen in other legal tech companies. There is a degree of necessity to get to that 99.9% kind of quality level that the client wants. And then the second point is there's a degree of owning the means of production, whether that's intentional or simply because legal teams say, look, if we're going to outsource this to you, we'd rather you just did the whole thing from top to bottom, sent it back all wrapped up with a little bow on it. And if you're going to do that, you need people. You can't just have a tech solution. I mean, you just talk us through the logic of having tech and people on your side.
Yeah, definitely. So I think most other AI companies in Silicon Valley have some version of AGI as their North Star, right? And that's never been kind of universally defined, but Sam Altman once defined it as machines replacing humans at most economically relevant tasks. And we not only think that that's a depressing future, but also not even a realistic one when it comes to domains like legal, because ultimately trust is a human to human sort of experience. And ultimately, the accuracy does need to be 100%, or at least people believe that it needs to be 100%. And so we've just made our problem statement very different from AGI, which is, can we prove that one lawyer can do the work of 100 historic lawyers and actually start to do a lot of work that was never possible before, because they now have access to these insights that the company brain gives them. So I think it's a very, very different. And so I think in that sense, the humans are necessary. We're also not, because we don't profit off of humans spending more time than is necessary. We're not trying to build a law firm to compete with traditional law firms. I think in some sense, the goal is that this law firm becomes unnecessary over a period of time, because ideally we spend as little time as possible from our own margin perspective. But for this interim period, I think there's going to be it's just unrealistic to expect the transition to go from almost no adoption of AI to AGI, which is almost how I think a lot of companies are behaving. And so we provide this ramp, I would say. And I actually really believe that, like, again, I'm obviously optimistic, but personally, I believe there's going to, for every 100 jobs that are being replaced, which I think will happen with AI, I believe there's going to be 100 new jobs that are created. And the worst thing that would happen is that the 100 people that are losing their jobs aren't actually being equipped for the 100 new jobs that are emerging. So I think we're a little bit providing, like, somewhat inadvertently, we're now building this AI augmented labor pool and training these people to really reinvent themselves. And a lot of them are really eager and desperate for this, but they don't really know where to go. Law schools don't teach it. No sort of legal tech company is viewing it exactly in this way. So I think there is a really bright future, and I believe that we're positioning ourselves to be offering something much broader than just software.
Yeah, and I liked your point about the individual lawyers can do much more with the AI. It's not so much about just replacement or whatever. It's, although we may get there at some point in certain streams of work. But I mean, so like with that team you've got with Johnson and Hannah, and now OutHouse, and I guess others who you may have hired since you launched. That's a significant body of human expertise, then you add the AI bit, then you add the aspects that are coming from the clients. I mean, that's quite a formidable productive force. Think of it as an engine, right? I mean, in terms of your growth, how is, I mean, obviously, I know you can't really get into the numbers, but generally, how is that going?
Yeah, I mean, we've had 1,000% growth this year so far.
1,000% growth.
So it's been quite significant. And a lot of that, we actually weren't, even though we did come out of stealth a few months ago, that was mainly for hiring purposes because we found there were some candidates who really appreciated the external validation of a big venture round from a good investor, all of that. But we were still fairly quiet about what we're actually doing up until last month at the summit that we had in New York, where we really unveiled a lot more. And our website now has a lot more detail around the offerings. We're still not sharing everything. But I think we had a real inflection point where I think this model of, I mean, every customer that I've talked to gets a lot of comfort from knowing that they don't need to make this extreme decision of sort of trusting AI completely or continuing to really have a team that's not adopting it in any significant way. And this idea of just augmented intelligence where you're getting your team trained, you can talk to a human. But obviously, the one thing that does change for us to have a successful tech company here is the unit of value shifts from the number of hours or even the number of humans to either something output based, the number of contracts, right? Or more of a fixed fee model. And at that point, we're very transparent about where the human is in the loop, where the human's involved. But the customer also understands that for us to get the kind of margins that we want in the long run, we're actually trying to automate as much as possible. So we're not
And
just giving.
what kind of metrics are you using for charges? I mean, are you saying like we'll do 10,000 contracts of this type for X amount of money, or I mean, how does that break down?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like the nice thing about going after, I'll just call it the labor budgets, right, is that the ROI is extremely clear and tangible. And we're often seeing 5 to 10x kind of ROI on a customer using us because a lot of times it'll be, this is no secret that even Johnson Hanna's team is already acting as an extension of the in-house teams of Stripe,
Many, many.
OpenAI, et cetera. And so when they can now see, okay, one of these lawyers on my team who's now fully loaded and trained on Eudia's platform either is or is not getting through the contracts 5 times faster, 10 times faster at the same level of accuracy. And if they are, that starts to have some interesting implications. Like if they were previously using a team of 20 to do the same amount of work, they can now have arguably 10 or 5 people kind of doing that work. And so that's where the ROI is like extremely tangible. And it might seem like, okay, we're actually just reducing the number of jobs. But I think what I found really interesting is none of our customers have, like, once they see that this is possible, if anything, they're even hiring more of these kinds of people because they're not just doing the old work faster. They're actually starting to, for example, think about the so what of the red line instead of just redlining. And that might mean, hey, I actually noticed we've never won this position in the last 10 deals that we tried to negotiate it. I recommend that we just concede it now and pull forward this revenue much faster, right? And that's the kind of insight that the general counsel would love to have lawyers who are thinking like that. But historically, we've all been so bogged down by just high volumes of work that
Yeah.
there's not time in the day to even think about that kind of thing.
So just to sort of clarify that a little bit. So is it a volume based price, or do you just sit down and negotiate, and they give you, you charge a fixed fee per year, and you just say, look, it's going to be X,
Yeah,
and
we've
we'll figure it out.
we've optimized for simplicity to date, so it's typically just a low flat fee annual fee, and that's based off of you typically having proven in some kind of a pilot already. Here's the clear ROI, and so this is going to be a small fraction of sort of the amount of value that we're delivering.
Gotcha. And on the tech side, I know you don't want to explain everything there, understandably, but obviously you're using some degree of generative AI. I presume you're tapping the various models, you're using the agentic aspects where they make a good fit. I mean, anything you can say more about that?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I think on the AI side, exactly like you said, I think from day one, we've been on the one hand model agnostic. On the other hand, we have a whole research team constantly figuring out where is Anthropic better or worse than OpenAI, and how do we kind of combine the models in a way that makes sense. I think the part that's honestly the most unique, and from day one, Ashish, my co-founder, he built search at Apple. We have a lot of engineers who have more of a background in knowledge graphs and building knowledge platforms. My own view from the last decade of working in this space is whenever I work with an in-house team, it's very clear that the person who's been there for 15 years, even if they have an IQ of 100, is way more valuable than the Yale law grad with an IQ of 160 who's been there for one day. And so, in other words, it's not about intelligence, it's actually about knowledge. And so, a lot of our platform has been, and even our engineering team has been all about how can you really capture and codify and extract this institutional knowledge, which is distributed across a variety of SaaS applications and locking people's heads. And so, a lot of our approach has been really learning over the last 2 years deeply how do you do that effectively and efficiently. But once we actually can build this brain, which is more of a knowledge graph than it is an AI problem, then when you apply AI to that, sort of, I mean, everyone's talking about context engineering now. So that's really where it starts to add a lot of value for the company.
Yeah, and also preference engineering as well, to some degree.
Exactly.
Giving them what they want in the language they want and so forth.
100%. And yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, please go on. You were going to say.
But yeah, just kind of to that end, I think the nice thing about having worked with almost exclusively chief legal officers so far is, to your point, for the parts that are subjective or where it's more of a preference, like a stylistic preference, you also have the ability to just ask the CLO when it comes to your M&A deals in Brazil, whose lawyer, which of the lawyers that you work with do you want us to model this off of? And even though it may not be objectively right or wrong, I think that's then allowed the customer to feel like they're getting the kind of outputs that they really love because it matches whoever the favorite human expert is.
Yeah, and also one of the aspects of knowledge, obviously, is that it's accretive, it's accumulative, which of course goes back to your original point, which is that so much in the traditional law firm, then client relationship, it just gets lost in the mix. I mean, I know, knowledge management teams try very hard to capture it, but it kind of gets lost to the client. Interesting. So 1,000% growth this year, and we're not even out of this year. How far do you think you'll get next year? More M&A?
Yeah, we're not as I think one maybe but just because we're probably one of the few Series A companies who has now already made 2 acquisitions. I think people put us into this kind of hit by a bunch of companies. Yeah, but actually, like, one of my potentially controversial views is that a very small percentage of people are actually responsible for a hugely outsized amount of kind of progress, I'll just call it. And so we've actually met hundreds of acquisition targets, and what we've concluded is there's like less than 1% that actually have these next lawyer type of equivalents, right? Of people who are like, even if whether you call them a law firm or an ALSP or whatever it is, they actually are the best out there. And I think the definition of the best is also changing in an AI first world, where historically it was maybe the most credentialed or the number of Ivy League degrees is how you judge the quality of an institution. I think now AI is this sort of completely new skill set of really knowing how to leverage it well. And so we actually aren't on a big buying spree. I think it's more about where there are companies that meet that bar, which is a very, very high bar. Then we have the capital, and we're going to share more about that over the next few months. But we are in a really good position from a capital raising perspective. So we just really believe that this entire ecosystem needs to be changed, and it's not about incremental change, it's about exponential change. And frankly, kind of once you solve the incentive problem, I've always believed everything else will fall into place. But right now, the incentives are just unfortunately very perverse for law firms, for a lot of tech companies. I mean, just across the board, they're not in the right direction. And so that's what we're trying to really kind of solve here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Omar. Really appreciate it.